There's a number you're supposed to have saved by now. You may not know exactly what it is, but you have a feeling, a vague, uncomfortable sense that it's more than what's currently in your accounts. That feeling is not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Most people are behind the curve on retirement savings, and they know it, but the specifics stay blurry because nobody ever sits down and shows them the actual math. The problem with blurry is that blurry is comfortable. If you don't know the exact number you're behind, you can't feel exactly how far back you are. You just feel generally uneasy, which is manageable. You can live with generally uneasy. What you can't live with, financially, is arriving at 60 and discovering the gap between where you are and where you need to be is 2 decades of catch-up that the math no longer allows. Today we're going to replace blurry with specific. Not to make you feel bad. Specific numbers are not indictments. They're tools. A specific number tells you exactly where you are, exactly what the gap is, and exactly what it would take to close it. You cannot navigate toward a destination you can't see. I'm Arthur. This video is about the savings benchmarks that most financial professionals use internally, translated into plain numbers at every decade of your working life. We'll go through every age milestone, show you what the math actually requires, and explain why the numbers get harder to ignore the longer you wait. If you want clear numbers every week, no noise, subscribe. This is the channel for it. Let's start with why benchmarks exist at all. Retirement savings is a long horizon problem. It doesn't feel urgent at 25 or 30 or even 35 because the end point is far away and the cost of not saving today is invisible. You don't feel the compounding you're missing. You don't see the portfolio that isn't building. The cost is entirely deferred until the deferral ends, at which point it becomes a crisis instead of a gap. Benchmarks give you a snapshot view of a long horizon problem. They answer a simple question. Given your income, your likely retirement needs, and the mathematics of compound growth, how much should be in your accounts by age X for you to be on track? The most widely used benchmark framework, used by major financial institutions including Fidelity, T, Rowe Price, and most independent financial planners, is an income multiple. How many times your current annual salary should be saved at each age? It's not a perfect system. It doesn't account for debt, pensions, inheritance, or specific retirement spending plans, but it gives you a working baseline that is better than nothing and dramatically better than blurry. The standard income multiple benchmarks are: by age 30, 1 times your annual salary saved; by age 35, times your annual salary saved; by age 40, 3 times your annual salary saved; by age 45, 4 times your annual salary saved; by age 50, 6 times your annual salary saved; by age 55, 7 times your annual salary saved; by age 60, 8 times your annual salary saved; by age 67, 10 times your annual salary saved. These benchmarks assume you'll replace approximately 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement, drawing 4% per year from your portfolio, with Social Security making up a portion of the gap depending on your situation. They also assume you start saving at around 22 and maintain a savings rate of approximately 15% throughout your career. If you start later or save less, the multiples required at each age become harder to hit, which is exactly why understanding them early matters. Now let's put real dollars to these numbers, because income multiples only become meaningful when they become specific. If you earn $60,000 a year, at 30, need $60,000 saved. At 35, need $120,000. At 40, need $180,000. At 45, need $240,000. At 50, need $350,000. At 55, need $420,000. At 60, need $480,000. At 67, need $600,000. If you earn $80,000 a year, at 30, need $8,000. At 35, need $100,000. At 40, need $220,000. At 45, need $320,000. At 50, need $480,000. At 55, need $560,000. At 60, need $660,000. At 67, need $800,000. If you earn $100,000. At 35, need $200,000. At 40, need $300,000. At 45, need $400,000. At 50, need $600,000. At 55, need $700,000. At 60, need $800,000. At 67, need $1,000. These numbers are not wild. They are not the numbers of people who want to retire to a yacht. They are the numbers required to maintain approximately your current lifestyle in retirement. at a withdrawal rate that gives your money a high probability of lasting 30 or more years. And yet, according to the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement savings for Americans aged 35 to 44 is $45,000. The benchmark for a median household income earner at 40 is approximately $200,000. The gap between the benchmark and the median reality is not a rounding error. It is a $105,000 deficit in the median case, and it compounds from there. This is not a personal failure story. It is a structural one. Most people were never given these numbers in school, in their first job, or when they opened their first bank account. The system is not designed to hand you the retirement math. You have to find it yourself, which is exactly what this video is for. Now let's talk about what the benchmarks mean in practice, decade by decade. Age 30, 1 times your salary. This benchmark is the one most people are furthest behind on, proportionally, because it's the first one, and it arrives before most people have started thinking seriously about retirement. At 30, if you earn $70,000 and have $70,000 saved, you're on track. If you have $15,000, you're behind. If you have nothing, you're well behind. And well behind at 30 is not a disaster, but it does mean every year that passes costs you more to fix. The math at 30 is relatively forgiving compared to every other age, because you have 35 years for compound growth to work, but only if you start now. The 1 times benchmark at 30 assumes you've been saving consistently since 22. If you're starting from 0 at 30, you need to save at a meaningfully higher rate than 15% to close the gap before it becomes structural. The most common reason people miss the 30 benchmark isn't lack of income. According to multiple analyses of consumer expenditure data, people in their late 20s are typically in their highest spending years relative to income, student loan payments, first apartments, car purchases, and the social spending that accompanies establishing adult life. The savings rate drops to near zero, not because income is low, but because expenses have expanded to fill the space. Age 35, 2 times your salary. Between 30 and 35, the benchmark doubles. That requires both consistent saving and meaningful investment growth. If you're earning $75,000 at 35, you need $150,000. Fidelity's 2023 retirement data shows the average 401k balance for people in the 35-44 age bracket is approximately $97,200. That's significantly below the 2-time benchmark for a $75,000 earner. The 35 benchmark is important because it's the first point where the gap, if it exists, is no longer easily closed by a small behavioral change, closing a $53,000 gap at age 35. The difference between $97,020 and the $150,000 benchmark requires either a substantial increase in contributions, a change in investment approach, or both. It requires a decision, not just good intentions. Age 40, 3 times your salary. 40 is the inflection point. It is the age at which the math shifts from behind but recoverable to behind and increasingly expensive to fix. If you earn $80,000 at 40 and have $120,000 saved instead of the $240,000 benchmark, you have a $120,000 deficit. To close that gap by age 67, 27 years away, assuming 7% annual returns, you need to save an additional $1,100 per month above the $1,000 per month you'd already need to be saving just to hit the benchmark going forward. That's $2,100 per month or $25,200 per year on an $80,000 income. That is 31.5% of gross income before taxes. For most households, that is possible only with significant lifestyle restructuring. The reason 40 is, the inflection point is not arithmetic. It is psychological. At 40, the retirement horizon is close enough to feel real. It's no longer a distant abstraction. The awareness arrives, often acutely, that the decisions made between 22 and 40 have been building the foundation that the rest of the working life will stand on. If that foundation is thin, the window for making it thicker is narrowing. Age 45, 4 times your salary. Between 40 and 45, the required multiple jumps by 1 full year of income. This is because the compound growth available at 50, 55, and 60 is doing less of the heavy lifting than it did at 30. The earlier years of compounding are the most powerful. We covered this in depth in the previous video. At 45, with 22 years until standard retirement, you need a portfolio that is already substantial enough to carry forward because the math is no longer willing to make up for large deficits on its own. The 40s benchmark at 45 for someone earning $90,000 is $360,000. The Fidelity data for the 45-4 age bracket shows an average 401k balance of approximately $190,200. The gap between the average reality and the benchmark is 180,000. For the person at the median, not the average, the number is lower still. Age 50, 6 times your salary. The jump from 4.5 to 6 size at 50 is the steepest in the benchmark schedule. 2 additional multiples of income in 5 years. This requires both aggressive saving and meaningful market returns in that window. For someone earning 85,000, the 50 benchmark is 510,000. This is the age at which the 401k catch-up contribution becomes available and becomes important. In 2024, people aged 50 and older can contribute up to $30,500 to a 401k instead of the standard $23,000. That additional $7,500 per year over 10 years, growing at 7%, adds approximately $103,000 to the portfolio by age 60. It doesn't close a large gap on its own, but it is a meaningful tool for people who are behind at 50 and have the income capacity to use it. The number to hold on to here: if you are behind at 50, every year of delay costs you more than it would have cost at 40, which costs more than it would have cost at 30. The math of catch-up is always more expensive than the math of consistency. Age 55, 7 times your salary. At 55, you are 12 years from standard retirement. The portfolio needs to be substantial enough to fund 30 or more years of retirement from a base that is 12 years away from being accessed. For someone earning 90,000, the benchmark is $600,000. For most people at this stage, the primary levers are savings rate, investment allocation, and the possibility of working a few additional years, each of which can meaningfully change the outcome. The age 55 window is also when some financial vehicles become available or more accessible. Some 401k plans allow penalty-free withdrawals at 55 if you've left the employer. IRAs maintain their 63.5 floor for penalty-free access. These are planning details, not shortcuts, but they matter for people who are considering early retirement options. Age 60, 8 times your salary. At 60, with 7 years until standard retirement, the portfolio should be at 8 times income and positioned to begin transitioning from growth-oriented to income-oriented. This doesn't mean moving entirely out of equities. A 30-year retirement requires growth throughout, but it does mean beginning to think about sequence of returns risk, the risk that a major market downturn in the first few years of retirement can permanently impair a portfolio's ability to recover. For someone earning $95,000 at 60, the benchmark is $760,000. The Social Security Administration's data shows that the average benefit for a worker retiring at 67 in 2023 was approximately $1,097 per month, or $22,884 annually. That amount covers a meaningful portion of the gap between portfolio withdrawals and full retirement income, but it does not replace a portfolio. It supplements one. Age 67, 10 times your salary. The terminal benchmark: 10 times your final salary saved. For someone who has earned $100,000 in their final working years, this is $1 million. Withdrawing 4% annually produces $40,000 per year from the portfolio. Combined with average Social Security benefits of approximately $22,884, total retirement income is approximately $62,884, replacing roughly 63% of a $100,000 pre-retirement income. Not 100%. That 37% gap is covered by reduced expenses in retirement. No more payroll taxes, no more retirement contributions themselves, often lower transportation and housing costs as lifestyle simplifies. The 10 years number is not arbitrary. It is the output of 30 to 40 years of consistent saving, compound growth, and not rating the portfolio. It is achievable, but only if the decisions made at 25, 30, and 35 support it. Here is what this all means in practical terms. First, check the number. Right now, today, log into your 401k, your IRA, your brokerage accounts, add them up, divide by your current annual salary. That ratio is where you are against the benchmark, not approximately, specifically. Second, identify the gap. If you're 38 and your ratio is 1, 2 times instead of 2, 6, which is the interpolated benchmark between 35 and 40, you have a gap. The gap is not a verdict. It is a number with a corresponding course of action. Third, understand that the course of action changes with age. At 30, the action is primarily savings rate. Start saving, increase the rate, automate it. At 40, it's savings rate plus investment optimization. Are you in the right funds? Are you taking unnecessary fees? Are you leaving any employer match on the table? At 50, it's all of the above, plus catch-up contributions, and a serious look at retirement spending projections. At 60, it's distribution planning and Social Security timing strategy. The benchmark is not the destination, it is the map. It tells you where you should be so that the compounding that gets you to the destination has enough raw material to work with. The single most important number in this video is your current savings multiple. Everything else is context. Your savings multiple is the number that tells you whether the context matters urgently or whether you have room to breathe. Calculate it. Write it down, then decide what you're going to do about the gap, if there is one, before the gap decides for you.